All right, and we are live. Welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining today. I'm so thrilled to have this amazing panel of experts talking about one of the most important topics happening in crypto right now. Um, and this is our fourth jam session, talking about U.S. crypto regulation, specifically going into the infrastructure bill, but also what the landscape looks like in general for crypto. So thanks so much to our guests, Jake Chervinsky, General Counsel at Compound, Kristin Smith, Executive Director at Blockchain Association, and Rebecca Reddig, General Counsel at Aave. Uh, Thank you all for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So I mean, I gave like just like very brief intros for all of you, but maybe if you can each say more about yourselves and how you are involved in the space.
Yeah.
Sure, I can go. I'm Kristin Smith. I'm the executive director of the Blockchain Association, which is the trade association in Washington, D.C. that represents the crypto industry. And so we work with our member companies to figure out what our public policy positions are. And then we have an advocacy team that works to implement those positions. Many times these days, the implementing means stopping things or changing, preventing bad things from happening, as opposed to proactively moving good things. But yeah, we're on the ground working on regulatory and policy issues in DC every day.
And I'm Jake Chervinsky, General Counsel at Compound Labs. We are an open source software development company working in the decentralized finance space, best known as the original developer of the Compound protocol. I am also one of the co-chairs of the DeFi working group at the Blockchain Association. So I've been working with Kristin for the last couple of years, trying, as she said, to advance good crypto policy in DC and stop crazy things like this infrastructure bill from happening. So that's me.
So, and Rebecca,
And I'm
and
Rebecca
by the way,
Reddig.
just sorry, just want to point out that uh, because of scheduling, Rebecca is now driving, so that's why you can see her. But just FYI, that's why you see kind of all of our videos, but not Rebecca's. Okay, now Rebecca with that clarification.
Thanks so much, Carrie. So my name's Rebecca Reddig. I'm general counsel of the Aave Companies, which is a group of based in Europe that develops blockchain-based open source software. They also developed the Aave protocol, which is a liquidity protocol on Ethereum. I am a member of the DeFi working group through the Blockchain Association and also the co-chair of the AML CFT working group at the Blockchain Association, and worked with FATF through the Blockchain Association and otherwise on their current guidance relating to that. Also brought in DeFi. And prior to joining Aave, which was just about 5 months ago, I was in private practice representing a number of different software development companies that were working in the DeFi space and did a lot of work on regulatory counsel and the like. So I've been working on DeFi for a number of years.
Awesome. Well, I mean, it's a real privilege to have you all on this panel talking about this. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. So I think first thing is first, just to get everyone on the same page, because it sounds really strange to be talking an infrastructure bill. Like, what does that have to do with crypto? So if you can all kind of get everyone up to speed, why would this have such a huge impact on the space that it's kind of rallied everyone together?
Yeah, so I think it's been a priority for the Biden administration and also a bipartisan group of senators to move an infrastructure package to, among other things, repair roads and other sort of critical infrastructure in the U.S. The reason crypto got involved is because there was, Congress wanted to pay for this legislation, and instead of raising taxes, one of the ways they wanted to help pay for all of this spending was to find ways for increased tax compliance. And the cryptocurrency world is, growing. There are not regulations in place today for centralized crypto exchanges to issue 1099s, just like you would have from your stockbroker. And so the idea was, well, this could generate revenue if a provision like this were included. The problem is the way that they crafted it was done in a very sort of last minute way, and really expanded the definition of a broker to include types of entities that went well beyond the centralized crypto exchanges that should be doing that kind of information reporting to capture software developers and validators and other ecosystem participants. So that's kind of the backstory as to how it ended up getting in there in the first place.
Yeah, I think Kristin basically covered to, I think, expand out a little bit on the idea of what a broker typically is before this expansive definition. It's what you'd think about as a centralized party that you either go through to trade or to execute some sort of transaction. And so the type of language that was included, which we'll probably get into, and I know Jake can talk about really well, were not the types of centralized parties we were used to seeing. And we're really bringing in individuals who operate in the blockchain space, who really either are just operating on behalf of themselves, but could be captured by language, which is part of the problem, is that it just was not, I think, as in tune with the technology or up to the way that the system worked as it needed to be.
Yeah, I think all that's exactly right. And I think what was so striking about the provision when we first saw it was the provision would have imposed compliance obligations on persons who not only aren't typically treated as brokers, but also who are fundamentally incapable of complying with the rule, right? So like imagine a law that says if you want to run a business in the United States, you have to jump 20 feet in the air from a standstill. And if you don't do that, then you're in violation of the law and you have to pay fines or shut down your business, right? It just makes no sense at all. And the only impact of that is either to force companies to shut down or to move offshore. And that's really how it read to us. I think when we first saw it, we thought this must just be a mistake because it doesn't make any sense in the context of the technology. I think that as we dug into it more, and we'll probably get to this, what we realized is that in part, this was the goal of a provision, which was to expand the jurisdiction of the U.S. Treasury Department's warrantless surveillance over financial transactions to non-custodial parties within the crypto ecosystem who traditionally would not have any kinds of customer due diligence requirements. But just like the Treasury Department had proposed about 7 or 8 months ago with FinCEN's proposed rule, which we also all sort of got together to fight against, this felt very much like trying to sneak an expansion of financial surveillance into the tax code through an attachment to the infrastructure bill, which is must-pass legislation. So that was really sort of how we took it from the start. Oh, Cami, you're on mute.
I was saying, so who is behind this? Because it seems just like very scheming, like trying to pass this thing that would just comprise all of crypto, including non-custodial parties. Like who is writing this legislation and who's like responsible for crafting this language?
So the senators that were writing the legislation were Senators Sinema from Arizona and Portman from Ohio, and it was really Senator Portman who sort of managed this provision. And with the Blockchain Association, we also have a tax working group, and our tax working group has long been working with Portman's office because everyone sort of knew that information reporting requirements for centralized exchanges is something that was coming, and we wanted to be aiding in that process. It's our best understanding that this was language that Treasury brought to Senator Portman last minute, and that was kind of part of the deal. Getting these big packages like that, spending $1 trillion, there's a lot of sort of deal making, and that this was something that Treasury and the White House wanted to have in the bill, and that the sponsors in the Senate sort of agreed to take it, and didn't, in that process, because everything was moving so quickly, they didn't have a chance to run it through the stakeholders for feedback. And so it wasn't until a few days before this was public that we were able to see the language for the first time and realize there was a problem. And the political issue we were facing is we needed to get that change, and they felt like they had been locked in this deal with Treasury. And so it took a lot of political pressure for us to open up that conversation, which we ultimately ended up, having a more constructive dialogue, but we had to really bring a show of force in order to get the attention that we needed to discuss what the language does.
Right. And so, Jake, you mentioned that different parties simply cannot comply with these requirements. And why is that? Like, what exactly is it being asked of cryptocurrency participants?
Yeah, so the definition of a broker, well, rather, the requirements of a broker are to do Form 1099s, which will probably be familiar to most of the audience. These are the tax reports that you get from, pick your securities broker at the end of the year or at the start of the year that tell you what your capital gains and losses were, and therefore what you have to pay in taxes. This comes from the institution that you are a customer of, that knows all of the transactions that you've made because they've executed those transactions for you. They have a direct legal relationship with you. And that institution will also file the same information with the IRS. So not only do you as the customer know what your tax liability is, so does the government. The problem in the crypto context is many of the market participants who could in theory be captured by this new expanded broker definition do not have any direct legal relationship with anybody else in the crypto ecosystem. So think about a miner or a validator in a proof of stake system as a good example of this. Miners are, at least in theory, in the business of regularly effectuating transactions or transfers of digital assets on behalf of other persons. That's essentially what miners do, right? They add transactions to a block, and that's sort of what effectuates the transfer of a particular digital asset. But miners do not have any information about who the users are behind the addresses for which they are effectuating those transfers. And in fact, there is no way for a miner to obtain that information, right? We would have to completely redesign the blockchain from the ground up to say, instead of using these pseudonymous public-private key pairs, instead we're going to have some kind of centralized database that identifies every single user or owner of a particular address. And that's just fundamentally not how crypto works. So because of that, it is literally impossible for many market participants to comply with those reporting requirements. And again, it's not just miners. It's also software developers who could be captured by this, or app developers or hardware wallet providers or interface providers or any number of other folks who are working in crypto who could in theory get caught by this very broad and I think very vague definition, but have literally fundamentally no way to actually comply with the obligations that would be imposed on them.
Wow. Okay. So it's asking anyone running any sort of cryptocurrency from node to application to gather information and to provide information that they simply do not have. So okay. So like and that is why. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to back up. I think that we should talk about what the actual language that was proposed, which was anyone, and Jake started on to this definition, but the language was, and because I am driving, I don't have it in front of me, but it was like anyone who, for consideration, regularly either provides a service or effectuates transactions in digital assets. And to Jake's point, if miners and validators do, consideration is usually money, some form of payment. And so when you think about what miners and validators do, they do get paid for their services. in a certain way, and they do it regularly. And so when you have this really vague and expansive definition, as Jake was saying, you do capture everyone in it. The original definition did not specify minors, validators, or anything like that, but it was so broad and so vague that it captured all of these individuals and entities, where in the system that we work in, you don't have the information that you could actually use to even, fill out and provide 1099s.
Right. Oh, it's crazy. Okay, so that's why everyone kind of rallied to amend this. And so what was kind of the proposals that were put forward after kind of lawmakers heard the crypto community kind of go up in arms over this language?
Well, I think there were several senators that became concerned when they were aware of the language that was included sort of in the underlying legislation that Sinema and Portman put together. And you have to remember this legislation is 2,700 pages long, and the crypto provision is like 4 or 5 pages, so very, very small in the scheme of things. But we've had a couple longtime sort of crypto champions, Senator Lummis from Wyoming and Senator Toomey from Pennsylvania, who sort of immediately wanted to try to fix this. We also what I think was sort of a pivotal turning point in this whole sort of saga that played out was when Senator Wyden decided that he himself was concerned about this. Wyden has not traditionally been active on cryptocurrency issues, but he's a long time advocate for different internet policy issues, and I think really understands the software development world, and so he was concerned about something that would put unworkable requirements onto software developers. So the 3 of those senators worked together and ultimately came up with what we thought was a pretty good amendment to sort of make it clear that these wallet providers, software developers, and various types of validators were not included in the definition of a broker. And so that was introduced, and what was great is that the not just the industry, which I work with and represent, but also the entire crypto community really rallied around that. And I think had we had the opportunity for that amendment to have a vote, I think we had the votes. The unfortunate thing was that sort of the process and the politics overcame it, and we were not able to get a vote on that amendment.
So okay, so if you guys can kind of go over what happened that didn't go through.
Well, the pressure to get the infrastructure bill moving is the reason that didn't go through. This is a huge priority for the Biden administration. This is the August recess period, typically when the House and Senate are supposed to have time off. And there was a tremendous amount of pressure for them to move this and move it quickly. And so what happens is in the Senate, you can kind of debate things all day long, but there's a process called cloture where you can actually limit debate, and that also has the impact of limiting amendments. And so we were not able to get a vote on that amendment prior to the vote on cloture, which kicks off this 30-hour period of debate. And so at that point, it sort of pivoted to try to find another compromise that would maybe be agreeable to the Treasury Department and to others. But yeah, no, it was sort of the macro politics of infrastructure and then the process limitations.
It's also it's worth highlighting the unfortunate circumstance we find ourselves in now as we sit here. We know that a supermajority of senators support this amendment, right? In fact, even Senator Shelby, who maybe we'll get to this, sort of how the whole thing blew up in the end, the senator who ultimately objected to the amendment, even he came out and said he thought it was the right thing to do, and he agreed that the amendment should go through. It's just a matter of process and the broader politics that sort of stopped us from making that happen. So I think on on the one hand, that's very disappointing. On the other hand, I think it gives us some optimism that there will be a path to make this happen in the future. It's just really hard to imagine a world where the vast majority of sitting United States senators think a law should change in a particular way, and then there's no way for us to make that happen, especially given how long we have until the law becomes effective, assuming that it does work its way through the House, as I think we expect that it will.
So
And
that's interesting. I didn't know that. Sorry, I didn't know that Senator Shelby was also wanted this amendment to pass. He's the one who kind of said that he also wanted to increase defense spending for him to vote for the crypto amendment. Is that right? But I didn't know that he was like okay with it.
Well, and I'm not sure he clarified that in advance, but he did have a tweet later on, which,
Oh.
as you might imagine, crypto Twitter had a lot of fun with. The ratio was like 15-1 or something, thousands and thousands of comments on it. But yeah, he had a tweet where he said basically he agrees with Senator Toomey's proposed amendment, but he thinks that defense spending is even more important, which justified him shooting down the amendment because he didn't get his own amendment. And that's, also part of this is it wasn't just us trying to get amendments through, right? There were many different senators who had their own pet projects that they wanted to advance. And one of the political obstacles here was because, as Kristin said, the Senate really wanted to move this bill. They didn't want to get bogged down having to negotiate, with every single senator who had some amendment they wanted to get through. And the simple solution there is just to say, okay, let's just not do any amendments at all, because then we don't have to think about any of this. And that is sort of what happened in the end.
Oh, wow. Okay, so now what's next? This needs to go through the House, and how does the crypto industry's prospects look here?
Well, the good news is there are many House members that have come out in support of what Senators Wyden and Toomey want to do, or we're trying to do, and they've said that they want to find a way to address this in the infrastructure bill in the House. The challenge we have is it's not totally clear if there's going to even be an opportunity to bring amendments on the infrastructure package in the House. The thing that the House cares about, what Speaker Pelosi cares about, is there is a sort of second infrastructure package, I'm going to use in air quotes, called the Human Infrastructure Package, which is this $3.5 trillion spending bill that the House is wanting to move. And the first step to getting that spending is to get a budget resolution that outlines the parameters, at which point then Congress will go back and figure out the details and then finally pass a bill through a process called reconciliation. So there's a lot of trading going on because the White House wants something. The Senate really wants this bipartisan bill. The House wants this $3.5 trillion bill. And so the worry we have is that the House, in an effort to get what they really want, this bigger spending bill done, is that they're just going to pass the Senate bill as is and in kind of a political deal. And so it's not super clear to us that we're going to have an opportunity to change it. But we're working through all of the possible options right now. So for example, if this does go through as is, we could work to get another bill passed that changes it before it goes into effect. So that's one option we're looking at. We're also looking at trying to influence the regulatory process. There's also things that we can do through appropriations legislation to limit potentially the ability of Treasury and IRS to do a more expansive interpretation. So we're looking through multiple options right now, but there's the good news is there's a ton of interest in getting help in the House. We just need to figure out the right, procedurally, the right pathway for doing so.
Wow, I didn't know that this bill could just pass through the House without being discussed. That's kind of alarming.
Yeah. Our democratic process seems to be failing us right now. And when you get, you're supposed to. This isn't how it's supposed to work, right? This isn't the Schoolhouse Rock video version where something's introduced and it's vetted and debated and amended. And this is what's so scary about this is when you attach to these like giant must-move vehicles. it just takes on a life of its own, and that's the challenge we've been facing since this language emerged a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, so like, what are kind of the tools that crypto has at the moment? Like, a pressure for the House to vote on this, to change this, or is it just like going for another bill if this passes? Like, what's the most likely course of action?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tools at our disposal, and Jake and Rebecca were sort of involved in these discussions. I mean, I think the biggest thing crypto has going for us isn't necessarily the lobbying work being done by the crypto industry. That is certainly incredibly important, and that is growing, and the number of people working on these issues is growing. But I think the best tool that the crypto industry has is actually the broader ecosystem, right? It's the individual software developers and people who are helping with the day-to-day sort of operation maintenance of the network, and also the users, right? Because people who use crypto understand crypto, and the fact that they are willing to pick up their phone and call their congressman or their senator is incredibly powerful. And I think that is that's one of our superpowers is the ability of the community to get organized and to be vocal.
Wow, Jake and Rebecca, what do you think? Like, what's kind of the most likely course of action from here?
So I
Rebecca,
think
you want to?
sure. So I think it really depends on, even if the bill, the House as is with the language in there, there are a number of different tools, some of which Kristin mentioned, but there are lots of different avenues. There is getting clarification from the IRS, so asking for certain types of letters that will, you go to the IRS, you advance your position, you ask for clarification on the bill. There is, and Kristin can probably talk about sort of what happens behind the scenes when you go do this, but there's work behind the scenes before you go to the IRS. So you can get clarification that will help us try to exclude the types of people that the amendment tries to, or the types of actors in the crypto space that they exclude. And I think that other lobbying paths, and as you also referenced, Cami, there may be other types of bills that can be passed that will help, if indeed the entire infrastructure bill with the language as it is goes through too. The other thing I do want to say, which is a great tool, and is I think what Kristin was also saying in terms of the users, but it's really a testament to the crypto native ethos in how fast the community mobilized. Crypto Twitter really, really lit up around this issue really quickly. Lots of tweets, some of which of Jake's went viral, which was really, really helpful, and had lots of other senators retweeting them. And we did a lot of the call campaign was retweeted, and Kristin probably knows the final number, but I think there was something like 15 to 20,000 calls that went out to senators to ask them to vote in favor of the amendment. And so there are really two processes going on simultaneously, which I thought was really amazing, which was the lobbying efforts that Kristin and others led in a really organized way. And part of their great organization was making sure that they mobilized the community and made sure that the community was educated about what was going on really quickly so that we could mobilize quickly.
Yeah, there were actually over 40,000 calls made.
40,000. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I guess the only two quick things to add to that. I think it's useful. I'm just pulled up the actual language in the bill just to read this so people know sort of how vague and hard to understand it is. The broker definition is, quote, any person who, for consideration, is responsible for regularly providing any service effectuating transfers of digital assets on behalf of another person, end quote. So if you're anyone working in crypto right now and you read that, I do not think it is possible to know if it applies to you or not. It just doesn't mean anything, really. And in truth, some of the context for that is the initial version of the language we saw was actually a lot more clear and a lot worse. And the solution that I think everyone sort of came to was, let's just make this as meaningless as possible, because then nobody can object to it because nobody knows what it means. So the result of this is this will have to get interpreted by the Treasury Department in rulemaking. And I'm sure that there will be a rulemaking process. We will have to be very vocal in that process to influence Treasury to interpret this in a way that makes sense and to inform them if they are going down the wrong path. I think the second thing is, and this is I'm sure part of the process that we'll have in talking to Treasury, but also may manifest later down the road, is the constitutional implications of this rule. And I don't know that we have to get too deep into this now, but folks who've been following me know that I've spent a lot of time lately talking about the Fourth Amendment and our fundamental right of financial privacy. And I think that there are a lot of reasons to believe that a law deputizing private actors to surveil other US citizens and companies with whom they have no direct legal relationship, and then to report that information to the government, is very likely an unreasonable search or seizure under the Fourth Amendment. So that's an issue that we're going to have to keep thinking about as time goes on, and I think we should be glad here in the US that we have a Bill of Rights that does protect against some types of regulatory overreach.
That's so interesting. So this could very well be unconstitutional.
Yes, I mean, look, I think it already is. I'll be straightforward with that. I think a law that is so vague that no one can tell who it applies to, but if it applies, requires private actors to coerce other private actors to give them personal identifying information in which they would ordinarily have an expectation of privacy. To me, that's sort of facially unconstitutional. Whether we have to fight that out or not is a different question, because Treasury could interpret this in a very reasonable way, right? Treasury could say, yeah, the definition is really broad, but we actually only expect this type of tax reporting and compliance from centralized intermediaries, right? Exchanges and custodians who are already regulated by the Bank Secrecy Act, who have direct legal relationships with customers who are already prepared to and have accepted that they should do this kind of reporting. If that's what Treasury says, then I think that's great. I think that's what the law should have said in the first place. It's just we're going to have to see how the process plays out.
What about the First Amendment? Does that play any role here?
It definitely does. It depends, again, on how Treasury interprets the law. The First Amendment protects freedom of speech, which includes writing code. So to the extent that this rule could be interpreted to apply to software developers particularly, that would absolutely be a First Amendment issue. But also, look, it's early days in us having to sort of evaluate what this language means and how it plays with various different constitutional issues. This is part of the problem with adopting new legislation without actually thinking about what it means first, right? Like, this language was written a few weeks ago. It really should have gone through an ordinary process so that lawyers could actually weigh in on what the implications of it are. Unfortunately, that's not what happened, so it'll take us some time to sort of figure out what does this all mean, and is it constitutional either facially or as applied.
Wow. Okay. So going forward, it looks like there's a few options. One is that the House actually takes time to discuss all of this and weigh and vote, and maybe it gets modified there. If it passes, then Treasury would still have to make the rules. So this could be clarified so that it isn't so broad and far-reaching. If that doesn't happen, maybe a new bill could be drafted before this one goes into effect that kind of protects against this one. And I guess, I don't know, the last final tool or approach would be just taking it to the Supreme Court because it's unconstitutional. Basically.
I think that's fair. I mean, it's a long road.
Yeah. Okay. And if all of that fails, and this goes into effect, how can people in the crypto industry in the U.S. protect against this, against enforcement? Like, is the option to is this bill basically forcing crypto to go fully decentralized?
Also hard to say. I'm curious what Rebecca thinks about this. Again, we just saw this language a few weeks ago. We still don't even understand what it means. I think there are some actors who will be captured by this who will not have much trouble complying. Again, the exchanges and other custodial intermediaries, I think, will comply because they want to anyway, and they're looking for clarity about how to do that. I think when it comes to DeFi, it's really an open question because we don't know who this applies to. I'm sure that there are ways we can address the issue from an engineering perspective. I just think it's too early to figure that out.
I agree with Jake. I mean, not only who it applies to, but to your point, Cami, if a protocol is decentralized, the question is, how could it even apply? Who would the actor be who is collecting the information? And how could it even be effectuated if all you have are wallet addresses? So to Jake's point, yes, there are probably technological solutions that could be implemented, but the question is who would implement it, how, and all of those things. It's very vague. So I think we actually have a much longer road before we get to implementation.
Sure, but I'm wondering, if there's the risk that anyone who is enabling crypto transactions falls under this bill and is required to be a broker and provide information about their users. I mean, to me, it seems that the way that DeFi specifically will protect against a regulatory risk will be to be fully anonymous, to build uh, decentralized organizations that don't rely on any specific person that could be targeted, non-custodial, obviously, run by DAOs and token holders. It seems like this kind of just like going the most like censorship resistant approach seems like the safest path.
I think that's right, but I think that there's a limit there that we ignore sometimes, which is you're describing the system, which is decentralized, and that's wonderful. But there are still people behind all of this, right? And a lot of those people are in the US. And for DeFi to be the vibrant ecosystem and to grow into the infrastructure behind the global financial system that we imagine that it will, what that means is people in the US have to be able to use it with clarity about what the regulatory consequences are. So even if the system is decentralized, but no comfortable using it because they think that if they supply, two assets to a Uniswap pool, they have to KYC every other user of Uniswap and file reports with the government, then that's going to be a real problem because no one's going to want to use it. So yes, decentralization, of course, always is at the heart of what we're building here. Without decentralization, there's nothing interesting going on in crypto. But decentralization of the underlying protocol itself, I think, isn't sufficient if we really want this to grow into the amazing world that we think it will.
That's a great point. It's like maybe that's the starting point, but the U.S. also needs clear, friendly regulation, or more than friendly, just regulation that encourages this new financial system, instead of driving it away, for it to really thrive in the U.S.
That's right. And also regulate the technology and how it is intended to work without imposing the knowledge of the traditional finance, and traditional notions of corporate governance and things like that.
Yeah. So I mean, we I think like the other point I want to discuss and that you all have brought up is just how this really how the crypto community really kind of came together for this. So what can individuals do, and also if you guys can just like go through some of the efforts um, that have started because of this, and ongoing ones like the Blockchain Association and the Coin Center and others that are all that have been kind of working in this space for a while. Like, yeah, if you can just talk about kind of what the crypto industry is doing to make sure that this clear and friendly regulatory framework exists.
Yeah, well, I can jump in there. For organizations, for companies that are in this space, if you're not a part of the Blockchain Association, I would highly encourage you to join the Blockchain Association, because this is where we're able to work together to figure out what the policy should be, and of interacting with government with kind of a unified front. And so I think having more people participate in that system, the better. And the influence just doesn't happen, right? It costs money. You need to pay people to go to talk to members of Congress. You need to pay people to think through policy ideas. There were a lot of other tactics we used in this last battle, where we did a homepage buyout of the Washington Post, because that's where a lot of senators get their news. We did advertising that's targeted to Twitter. So there's a lot of different tactics that can be used to try to influence policy and good outcomes, and that takes resources in order to do that effectively. I would say on the individual side, there's a lot that can be done as well. And for all of the 40,000 people that called their senators this past week, I mean, that was tremendously helpful and effective. And so, to keep an eye out for Fight for the Future, because they are on top of things and they will let individuals know and when it's a key time to weigh in, and make it really easy to do that. I also think another tool that the crypto industry might not like to hear about, but I think that the appetite is changing there, is political giving, right? It's building relationships with people who are candidates or members of Congress that are running for re-election by supporting their campaigns. You get time with them, you get to talk to them, and then when a crisis happens, they tend to take those calls first. So it's being more politically active, I think is something we're going to see more of in the future. And so, for those who have the resources and want to take the time to build, that relationship there, I think that can be a very effective thing for individuals. But there's some other efforts going on as well. I can let Jake talk about that, or Rebecca.
Yeah, so I'll add two quick things and then let Jake jump in. One, I will make a plug for participation in the Blockchain Association, because what I will say is Kristin is especially gifted at ensuring that industry participants have a moment to weigh in on anything that's going on and that she's working on behind the scenes politically. So whatever the blockchain is putting forward as far as the position is a industry position. And so I think we can all be grateful to her for that and how she really cooperates with industry participants. So if you want to have a voice, really think about reaching out to the Blockchain Association so that you can weigh in as this process and other political processes go forward. I think we can be sure that this is not the last bit of crypto regulation we're going to see probably in 2021, and certainly we'll see more in 2022. So I think it's important to be involved that way. And I think the other thing that I'll add is that I think that starting to educate everyone about crypto and DeFi in general is really important. So, educating your parents about crypto, educating your friends about crypto who may know nothing about it is really, really important, because I think once people across the country really understand the benefits of this new technology, they will also have the incentive to work politically to lobby their senators and their congresspeople and their representatives to vote in favor of, I guess, beneficial regulation or technologically savvy regulation. And so there are a number of ways to start educating, one of which, to make another plug, is if you have an idea about how to educate and you need money in order to effectuate it, you can go to a number of different organizations that may give grants, one of which is the DeFi Education Fund that is giving out grants to people who are looking to build educational tools about DeFi to educate lots of different participants and stakeholders, or non-believers. I think that's another way you can get involved as well.
I don't have a whole lot to add to that. All I will do is second Rebecca's point about Kristin, who is genuinely a superstar and without whom we would be in a whole lot of trouble. So the Blockchain Association is wonderful. There's a reason why I do all my policy work through them. I absolutely think that U.S. crypto companies, if you haven't talked to the folks at BA yet, you absolutely should. You should consider membership. It's not to say there aren't other ways to be effective in policy advocacy, but definitely I think Kristin is an amazing resource and an unbelievable weapon in our arsenal. So we should use her as much as we can. The only other thing, actually, I will, just as I'm thinking about this, add is I think one aspect of our national strategy in the U.S. that we're missing right now is a state-by-state strategy. We've seen this to some degree in the state of Wyoming, which has made unbelievable progress, mostly focused on Bitcoin, thanks to Caitlin Long, since that's where her interests are. But we're starting to see state regulators get more active as well. And there's a huge diversity of opinions among the states. And I think that it would be to our benefit, just like some other industries. The cannabis industry is a great example, right? They've sort of like won a national battle by going through the states instead of by going through the federal government. And I think we can really learn something from that. We need someone like Caitlin Long, who's as effective as her and as passionate as her in every single state in the country. And that would be greatly to our benefit as well. And I think that's a big missing piece right now that we need to get up to speed on.
Such a great point. And yeah, the analogy with the cannabis industry is spot on. I also like it just seems to me that DAOs are kind of made for this kind of thing, organizing people, pooling money together towards one goal. So, politics DAO to donate to specific kind of lawmakers, senators, politicians that can make a change and who are pro crypto. Seems like the like obvious next step for the industry to make to influence policy going forward as well. Great, and then to wrap up, just like an overarching thought of what exactly is at stake. Like, how concerned should people be about this? Like, is it actually kind of the future of crypto in the US as something kind of as grand as that, or like, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I think, going back to your point on the DAOs, check out hodlpack.org. That's an effort to do kind of just what you described. But in terms of what this means is, I think this shows a couple of things. There are people in the US government that don't like crypto and want to take it down. There are also other people in the US government that realize that, hey, there's something here and we need to find the right way to deal with it and look at it. And there's going to be a tension between the both ends of that spectrum, I think, for a long time. And this is not the last of these battles. And so this, I think, if people weren't thinking about this and engaged with politics before, I think this for the crypto community has been sort of that moment, but this is not over with this fight. I think we're going to have many more to go until someday when there's sort of this watershed moment and everybody's like, aha, I finally get why this is so useful and valuable. And then we'll be in a different spot. But I think for the next, looking into the months and years ahead, that this is going to be just one of many big battles.
Makes sense. Jake or Rebecca?
What do you think?
What's at stake?
I don't know if I think this bill in particular puts the crypto industry at stake, but what I was thinking about a lot as we were all talking is there's a broader context here, which is everybody has woken up to crypto. I think it started last summer with DeFi summer, and I think it is only expanding out. The industry is gaining traction and momentum. There were articles about the crypto lobby in the Washington Post, in the New York Times, with relating to the infrastructure bill. So there's a lot of attention to the crypto industry, and it has definitely been going through both regulators and not as much with congresspeople on politics. But I do think that now is the time that we all need to be especially mindful of what's at stake here. And I think ensuring that there is thoughtful, technologically appropriate regulation is critical to, Cami, I think the point you made earlier, which allowing there to be innovation in the United States and not driving it out. I can say just anecdotally and experientially, when I was in private practice before I went in-house to Aave, there were a lot of developers who would come and say, listen, should we just be completely offshore, not have anyone in the United States because it just seems too uncertain to be here? And I think if regulation is not developed appropriately, that will be the ultimate impact. And it's not just the software developers or even, innovation that loses out. I think that US persons will lose out on the ability to participate meaningfully in a new financial system. And I think that would be a real loss if that's where we went.
So I agree with all that. I want to let me step back even further for a context, and I'll say something that sounds kind of pessimistic, but I'll follow it up with something more positive. I think that in the last year, crypto, as we've said, has really joined the world stage, right? Crypto is now geopolitically relevant. It is something that every government in the world that has any meaningful role on the geopolitical stage is now thinking about. The core concept of crypto is a new financial system in which users can send any amount of value to anywhere and anyone at any time in almost no time at all, almost for free, and also to conduct any number of other types of financial transactions now that we're building out the DeFi ecosystem. That is a very challenging concept to governments that are used to having control over the financial system through the regulation of intermediaries. What we are doing does not connect at all with that regulatory framework, right? The entire point of crypto is disintermediation, and the entire regulatory framework depends on the presence of intermediaries. So we're in, I think, a sort of more broad policy battle over what the future of the global financial system looks like. And we like to talk about how government officials don't understand what we're doing or don't understand the technology, and I think that that's true for the most part. There are also policymakers who understand very well what we're doing, they just don't like it. And that's an argument that we have to have, and we need to get better at explaining why our vision for an open, permissionless, financially inclusive financial system is better than, is a meaningful improvement over what we've had before, and why it is only enabled by this technology. So the positive and optimistic thing I will say is, I think we have extraordinarily good arguments for that. And I think the vast majority of people who see and understand what this technology does, the power that it brings to every corner of the world, and even policymakers who are most interested in maintaining the US dollar as the global reserve currency, even for them, there are all kinds of reasons why this system is the best system for US interests and for carrying out what matters to them. So I think that ultimately we will succeed, but I think we're just at the beginning of a many years long battle over what the future of finance is going to look like.
This was such a conversation. I really hope it was clear. It made things more clear to people watching. It certainly did to me. This was super helpful. And I agree. I think I am optimistic as well. I think there may be some lawmakers and politicians who just don't like crypto, but I really believe most will once they see it and use it and understand it. I think that the ones who don't will be in the minority, because I mean all of us obviously are kind of converted already, but it's just better. It simply is. It's more efficient, it's faster, it's cheaper, it's finance for the world of the internet, for like the present and the future. So I think eventually regulators will come around to that, to see that. But we are kind of in this transition at the moment, and it's a bit painful and uncertain. But with help, I mean, thanks to all of you with all of your work, I think we'll get through this successfully. So uh, thanks again for joining, and thanks everyone who watched live. And I am dropping the POAP link here in the chat for everyone to claim their POAP. And with that, we are concluding our fourth jam session. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cameron.
Thanks.